Thank you. And we are welcoming Ric Garcia today. You saw his introduction in our little write-up about him, and you may have consulted his wonderful art, but we'll let him tell us about himself because we only have an hour, so we're not going to do a big introduction, but we'll let him talk. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Go ahead, Ric.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank Jordan and Mariana for hosting this today, and Glenn Echo and the group for showing up this morning. I'm hoping to share a little bit about my, where I started, where I came from, and where I am now. I have a slide presentation that will show you some of the artwork, but I'm here in my studio in Riverdale Park, Maryland. And the studio is a co-op of 10 artists, and it's called Passageways Artist Studios. And I'm hoping to also give you a small example of how I construct my paintings and share a little bit of the space that you see behind me. I'll be switching devices to do that, and forgive any technical difficulties that we have during the process. But I hope to, share a little bit about my story and make it entertaining for everyone. I'm going to switch over to a PowerPoint presentation. And this is an opportunity for one of those technical difficulties that I was discussing earlier, but I think it's going to go well. So my family arrived in Florida in 1966 from Cuba, and I was born in 1968. Soon after. They had made certain political choices because they had gotten married 10 years earlier, but because of the conflict in the island, they felt it wasn't a great idea to start a family at that time. So once they arrived in the United States and settled in Miami, they began to start a family. So some of these are going to be highlights. I'll be skipping around. I don't want to go too deep into the bio. So diving immediately into what was the first piece of artwork I'd ever seen. And that happened to be Leroy Neiman's artwork for the 1976 Olympics. And of all places, was at a local Burger King. He had cooperated or shared his work, and it was a promotional, kind of like how now they do Minions promotions. Back in the 70s, Leroy Neiman was really hot, and he was doing it with Burger King. I went to the University of Miami, and I received a BFA in graphic design and illustration. But I spent most of my time in the sculpture and painting department. I was like, their stepchild, basically. And not as a direct result, but I had just a strong interest to pursue fine arts. I was able to receive a scholarship for painting. While at the university, I had opportunity to partner up with some film students, and we created this film where I painted a series of paintings. And the idea, unfortunately, it's not documented as other pieces are, because who would have thought? But it was the idea that there was an artist and he was painting, and I was not the artist in the film. They were painting a painting, and so it had to be a progressional. And by the end of the film, the painting was revealed, and it happened to be like a death scene, like a pieta kind of death scene with the victim on the floor and the person who killed them regretting it and holding their body. I don't know, some might find that gruesome, but it was really exciting for me to work on that. Then I graduated in 1990 and went immediately to work. I thought that I was going to go into pursuing fine arts career, showing in galleries or at least try and break into the gallery system in Miami. But it turns out getting a steady paycheck was really great. So I started working in advertising. and I created digital illustrations, and I was living on South Beach. And during that time when I was living on South Beach, I made a lot of friends with different artists from the South Florida Art Center, various people, and go out to happy hours and stuff like that. And during that time, I met my future wife, who was the director of education at the South Florida Art Center at the time. She happened to move into my apartment complex, and she really didn't have an art background, but she had an education background. So everybody in the apartment complex, there was like 12 units, said to her, if you need to order artist supplies, go talk to the guy in the N unit. He's an artist. So that's how we met, and we started dating. And, you know, it's just a good time while we were there. But again, it was commercial illustration, which was at the heart of what I was practicing at that time. I was yet to really start a studio practice and really be dedicated to my paintings and my craft. So the 2000s came about, and something fundamentally shifted it in my life. And the first thing was 9/11. And what happened with that was that there were a lot of artists that had studios in the building. And by proxy or by association, I met, you know, I knew them through the friends in South Florida. And I thought to myself, you know, what am I waiting for? You know, life is really short, and you really just need to, you know, follow through with what you feel is your passion. The next thing that happened was that that beautiful woman in the center of the screen, we got married in the 2000s. And we then decided to relocate to DC. She was from Jersey, and she had an opportunity to, in her past work in Washington, and she really loved it. And she said, hey, why don't we move to DC and figure out what we want to do? And I went along, and the image on the far left, far right, is there as a proxy for having relocated to DC, but gives me an opportunity to talk about a mural that working with the local boutique, interior design firm and boutique here in Hyattsville called Green Owl Design. They did a renovation of the space, and I was commissioned to produce a mural in 2015. And since they were, you know, in DC and near Capitol Hill, we created this Capitol Hill theme for the back wall near their bar. Oh, excuse me. Let's see. So, so we relocated to Washington, D.C., and then we, you know, I started working for the Smithsonian. And at that time, in 2002 is when I relocated. I started a self-directed art studies, and that was at the Smithsonian Associates, which is who I work for as a visual designer. I produce a catalog, a monthly program catalog, and we produce programming that's science, popular culture, philosophy, and many other topics related to the Smithsonian. But at the same time, I was studying at the Art League located at the Torpedo Factory. Now, there's that really pretty picture that everybody knows about the Torpedo Factory, but I was studying in one of the offsite buildings, you know, further down, you know, but it was great. We had good instructors, and I learned a lot during that time. And due to my reaction to 9/11, what I realized that I needed further education to really hone my skills beyond what I had already, the discipline that I had already created for myself. But I really needed to, you know, as the gamer kids say these days, you know, level up. So during this time, I met one of my first mentor, which was an instructor called, her name was Trinka Margra Simon. And she produced a book that to this day is a reference for me. And I really can't, you know, say how important it is to have reference books and biography books on artists. I mean, that was something that I felt was really important to my development as an artist. And she wrote this book, The Art of Composition. And that was really helpful for my future work. She was also while teaching at the Smithsonian Associates, she was also a copyist at the National Gallery of Art. And these are some of the student projects or student drawings. I tended to really enjoy still life. These are pretty academic. And, you know, these are the better drawings from the portfolio documentation. Standard stuff, the drawing on the right is a process where you have black Conte and you rub it down on the surface of your drawing paper, and with a kneaded eraser, you then begin to remove the Conte, creating your tonality. You know, it's a process that I really enjoy, and the drawing on the right is using the same Conte crayon, but in a different way. I really love just how creamy Conte crayons are to produce drawings. So also, I was sketching in a little 9x5 book all the time on the metro. You know, I sketched my kids, I sketched, you won't believe it, but the guy in the hat literally was sitting across from me on the metro train one evening. And so these are all like basically get the gist of the drawing down in like 5 minutes because somebody's going to walk off the train. So it was a great exercise in decision making, which I really think part of painting is, you know, a process of making decisions, compositional decisions. And this is a great exercise. And like the really big challenge for me was trying to do a contour drawing, such as the one on the lower left of the screen. I got lucky with that guy because he slept for a while and I missed a few of my stops, but it was great to pull that off. You know, I would go at lunchtime on the National Mall and I would produce, you know, I just draw the trees and, you know, I'd throw in my dog, you know, that really wasn't there, but I thought, oh, that would be nice. So again, compositionally, not necessarily painting what I see, but or drawing the idea of what I want to see, or just creating from imagination while still using the world as a starting place. More drawing, I just felt so strongly about just drawing in that sketchbook. I could make all the mistakes I wanted. I could test ideas. I was doing this heavily between 2006 and 2007. And I mean, that was, I didn't have a studio at that time. I was starting to get a home studio put together. I was raising my family, you know, my wife and I bought a home, and, you know, there was a lot going on at that time. So these were the first two non-student official kind of, I felt were strong works. I would go on walks in the morning to a local pond, and I started to develop bird paintings. And you know, the two on the screen sold. There was others that didn't, so they are not making the cut on this presentation, but everybody, you know, has good stuff and bad stuff. But at that time, I was also participating randomly and occasionally on group shows. I didn't have a large body of work, which is something that for an exhibiting artist, I think is very important, is that not only do you document your work, but you also have a strong body or multiple paintings, at the very least 10. And at that time, I didn't have enough to support something more than just occasionally showing. And I joined a local group, which I can't stress, you know, I really stress it a lot, that just having a community of artists to work with is really great to just have them as a support. And I had joined the Hyattsville Community Artists Alliance. So the very first show that I ever had was at Artomatic. I threw up a little bit of information about it for anyone who may not be so familiar with it. But this was a testing ground for me to try and understand, what an exhibition would be, what I wanted to exhibit, how I would network. This was really the beginning of a lot of things. And I was testing what direction I wanted to see it. You can tell that the dog made it into one of the paintings, but there's no birds. And this is the first time that I was exploring what I then developed as a subject matter to pursue. And that is the painting on the far left of the wall, which is the Pilon coffee cans, which is now on your screen. And this piece was called Una Tacita Cura. And in English, it's a cup will cure all. This is an 18 by 24 acrylic painting. And it was just the idea that when I was growing up in Miami, the Cuban exiles, it's like coffee was everything. You gathered around coffee. You could use coffee to say to someone that their visit was over. Like if you said to someone, "Hey, I'm going to go make some coffee," they kind of knew that it was time to end the visit for the day. So, and this happened to be my favorite coffee brand as I became, a young man. I started going to college. This is what was in my house, which most Cubans would have Bustelo, and which is what I currently can get here in Maryland is Bustelo coffee, which I don't have an example of. But so the following, so this particular painting received a lot of good attention. People just responded to it really well. So in the DC area, it seemed like there was a lot of love for Miami and for those that had gone, and the idea of the Cuban coffee. So the next year, I doubled down on this idea, and I developed it further. So slight divergence. Artomatic is awesome. It teaches you so much, and there's a lot of great friendships that are developed participating in that. This was also the first year that I started to gain some attention from critics and local curators. I also happened to have both of these paintings purchased, not necessarily during the show, but as a result of the show. That's one of these things they say about Artomatic. If you don't sell during the show, there's a chance you're going to have sales that follow afterwards. I also was able to do a commission based on these Pilon cans on the left. Here they are on full screen. And the Goya can on the side was playing around with just this, there's this whole kind of like mix of patriotism and with the Cuban exiles and almost religion aspect. So I thought of making like a religious icon out of a Goya can of beans. And this one was called Rice, Beans, and Country, I think, was the name of this piece.
Rick, can I ask you, are you mostly using acrylics at this point?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, at this point, I was using mainly acrylics, and I was using a lot of blending medium and retarder to slow down the drying time of the paint so that I could blend. Basically it was because I was taught how to paint with oil paint, which that has now changed, very old school. So I had open cans of thinner and I would splatter solvent around. And, my wife said like, "Hey, you don't do that. Stop doing that." So I switched over to acrylics. So I painted this way for a few years. So the following year in 2012, so this is 2009, not the following year, but in 2012, Artomatic was held in Virginia, and Crystal City, I believe. And again, doubling down. And there's an interesting factor going on, which was that I was doing these, the still life and doing the commission, working with a certain level of realism and lighting. And artists, you know, they really have to react to environment. And I, you know, my family had a lot of, there was a lot of demands on my time. And I had an interest in silkscreen, and I started to look at the paintings in a way that I could develop them faster and create ideas about the products, about other things that I couldn't necessarily communicate that quickly through what I had been doing up until this point, which I feel is a level of realism. I went flatter, and I think that was inherent because the commercial products, it was easy to make that transition. But I doubled down even further. And the piece up here with Celia Cruz and Desi Arnaz, it was called The Saints. And what I was trying to do with this piece was talk about the assimilation process, and you know, the black beans was almost like a religious act, you know, eating them. It was always at dinner time at my table. And, you know, Ricky represented, funny enough, the American aspect, because I'd watch him on TV, and he was a person of Latin origin that was on TV. And Celia Cruz represented my parents because that would play in my home, her music. Then the two pieces on the bottom were part of this exhibit as well. And later on, the piece on the far right became part of the was acquired in 2017 by the Art Bank DC Commission, the Arts and Humanities, which that was great. I have several pieces with Art Bank. I've been very lucky with that. So in that show, I then came to know Lenny Campello more personally. I had been following his blog, you know, since 2008, because I think he was away and then he came back into the area. But I really felt that it wasn't just about the painting. I really needed to understand the industry, and I had been independently following it. And when he included me in his blog post with the Artomatic 2012, that was a really big confidence booster for me. And either through different channels or through public channels, he's been really influential. During his curatorial talk for I believe it was a 2013 exhibit at Harmony Hall, you know, and it's interesting because I consider him, you know, a strong influence, but, you know, he's very giving. And during the curator talk, during the question and answer session, you know, several artists in the exhibit were asking him questions and about how we should apply to shows. What does he think about them? And during that process, I gained the courage again to apply to Black Rock Art Center for my first solo show, but a little bit more on that later. So I also produced prints based on these ideas about celebrating Latino culture. And I'm gonna go back for a moment. With these pieces, I started to realize that there's a lot of flexibility on how I could use this imagery. And I then began to play around with digital prints. Again, I was already, as part of my painting process, I was mocking up paintings and doing color patterning digitally. It was a very rough process, but nonetheless, it allowed me to quickly experiment with colors and design and composition. It was not a finished painting. It was not a finished drawing, but I would use it as my leaping off point to produce the painting. And I realized as the family grew, there was a little less time to sometimes execute those paintings. So I started to polish the drawings up, advance the studies beyond very rough compositions, and they became digital prints. And these were 30 by 30 inch prints, and they were a shadow box, they were framed in a shadow box. And I just started to think about the Goya product as a surrogate for Latino people, and that I could communicate ideas about them or about the Cuban culture, because Goya is Caribbean. It's not just Cuban, but I identify it as a very Cuban product for me. But in all honesty, it's encompassing the Caribbean peoples. There's also sometimes you just want to have fun, and again, promoting coffee. This was a very prominent thing in my home, but also I just love sunflowers. So I did a couple of paintings in this way. And I also wanted to include some nature. Remember, I started off painting birds. So I have one piece over on the far right here. It's called Caffeine Buzz. And there's several bees that are pollinating. And I kind of like imagine these pieces as being something where you might have it in Brooklyn, like on a windowsill, and it's an impromptu setup with coffee cans, and you're just, you keep your sunflowers there. This is where I started to really dive into just the history of pop art and understand Lichtenstein better, and just the use of Bend-Aid dots to activate the surface or to be a surrogate for other textural aspects that traditionally would have been done in a painting with gradations and such, and other ways of producing tonality. I then, moving on, but still within what we're talking about here, is that I continue to explore my heritage and share stories about my heritage. And by the way, that's my first home studio. It was a little 9 by 12 room, and I did all the work from there. And it was a tight fit, but it worked out. But I was expanding beyond the Goya can, looking at how I could tell more stories about my culture, but also my dual or bicultural aspect, which is, as a kid in the 70s, there was all this Geronimo and cowboys and Indian movies, just like there was also John Wayne movies with World War II in the South Pacific. But as a child of immigrants, you're trying to find a middle ground. So here I had drinking as a child this product at my dining room table, which was Hatue Malta. And on the afternoon movies or in cartoons, you had lots of depictions of Native Americans and Geronimo the Apache. So I started to connect these two figures. And at the time, I didn't necessarily realize just what a tight connection it was, with Geronimo being a freedom fighter, a rebel for his people and a leader, and Hatue in the Caribbean in the 1500s having a similar role, where he led Native American, not Native American, but Caribbean natives against the Spanish in what came out to be, I think, like a 5-year struggle or so. Don't quote me exactly, but this image here is also a great progressional, because this is not a finished piece. The next image that you'll see is where I'm constantly, I said, painting or drawing is about making decisions. And I said that I create digital mock-ups or digital studies. Well, I don't necessarily have all the solutions yet. And I felt that this piece was really flat. So my answer was to begin to apply some highlights and modeling through flat variation in color on the bottles, just to create more interest. This piece also talks about, you know, I use the labeling on the side to communicate ideas of that he wasn't a slave, he wasn't going to serve colonial Spanish occupation. So that speaks to that fact, since he's known as one of the very first revolutionaries in the Caribbean, a freedom fighter. This piece now, again, all my work is trying to communicate the historical nature in Cuba and the Caribbean. And with the Cohiba cigars here, you know, this was something that Castro would hand out to diplomats that would arrive on the island and stuff like that. So I created this image and I adjusted the labeling to say that it was revolutionary flavor. I also have him the year that as the blend year, and also I have the rosaries to have his connection with the Spanish, you know, monks that were on the island, and they were trying to assimilate the Indians, or I'm sorry, the natives of the island to Christianity. So this piece here, I have it so that I can talk about that iron beer is an actual product, and it's kind of like Dr. Pepper and birch beer, I guess, or root beer, and very syrupy and molasses. But growing up, I basically had this like strong man that I was, you know, drinking the can of. And at the same time, when I started to work on these paintings, there was the whole energy drink craze, and this idea of like, well, if you take something in, if you consume a product, that is somehow going to change your interaction, you know, or it's going to improve your body. So I played with the two ideas, and I came up with this, you know, since they're grouped together, there was a man club, also speaking to the machismo in Latin culture. And I played around with the labeling. And again, this is in the spirit of Lichtenstein. And here's a collage page where I really shows how I was expanded on these ideas. I've moved away from the Goya can, but it's still appearing in my work. But I'm now doing these pieces that have more Bende dots, more activation, very energized. I'm playing around with darker color palettes. Everybody, you know, identifies pop art with very bright colors. I was trying to shift the direction of that. Also playing around with the whole thing about hero worship with these pieces. And again, that you drink something and you're going to change into, you know, a swinger man or, you know, a Superman. I'm also paying continued homage to Atway with the Malta pieces that are on bookending the man code. Does anybody have any questions necessarily just regarding the what I had termed the Man series, which was Man Boss and Man Bond and Man Code?
I wanted to ask a question though, a little bit about your relationship with the audience, like how you decide to make imagery, how much of it is how people react to the work, and how much of it is just you want to make the work for whatever reason that may be.
So Artomatic 2008 was the one time that I reacted to what, as you say, what the public might want or what they react well to. But I thought it was important that it had to be meaningful to me. I wouldn't be able to be authentic about it if I was doing it purely just to respond to or appeal to someone outside of myself. So basically I paint for myself. And when I'm painting the superheroes and including them on these cans and these products, it's not necessarily responding to superhero movies or the superhero culture. It's more of mirroring that, and I'm only choosing iconography that I relate to. So for instance, I like Spider-Man, I like Superman. I'm not necessarily going to do something else, or I think that that particular character might add something to the meaning of the painting. I'm also communicating certain ideas about, and it might be hard to read, but with Man Boss, it's about business and working for someone. Man Bond was just pure fun. It was about James Bond. And you have references to 00 Bro ounces on this piece. And, I think on here also, I have something about shaken, but not, oh yeah, right at the top. Now that was a statement that, and I'm gonna butcher the actor's name, Elba. Somebody could help me out, but he's a British actor, and I think he's African.
Idris Elba?
Huh?
Idris Elba?
Idris Elba, yeah, thank you so much. So I was driving into work, and they were playing around with the idea that he would be a James Bond. And he kind of quipped and said, never shaken nor stirred, meaning how, he's just going to proceed forwards whether he's considered or not for the role. And I thought that was great, because you don't want to shake a soda can. And so I played around with that, and that interview inspired a little bit of this piece to develop it. Not necessarily seen in these pieces, but music, or just a lot of stimulus from whatever I'm interacting with that I guess it's culturally relevant, will inspire certain ideas. A lot of the artwork is in some way a personal story I'm trying to tell, or a personal opinion about life. And I had an opportunity to tell that story further with Art Watch, and they had a project that were these ancestor panels. So I was able to participate in this project in 2017. And over at Black Rock, they constructed a house and attached all these panels. And my panel is the one in the upper right-hand corner that you can see, it says Cuba. And it was my family's story of how they arrived in Miami. So after producing a lot of the Cuban products, I decided to venture into using the comic book hero as a mythological hero, but also sharing my Latin culture. So I decided to have them having Spanish word balloons. And then in the caption below them is a translation that would relate to the word bubble, so that there could be a connection with the English-speaking viewer and myself as trying to share my culture. A great example is this one, which is over in the far right with Superman, which is called show off. And Spanish slang word for a kind of show off is postalita. So I figured that these pieces would be compelling if they were showing, the struggle between men and women. But here we are with Superman and Wonder Woman. And what I'm doing with these pieces is lifting the images from different comic book panels and adjusting them as needed. Sometimes the images in the comic book panel are cut off, so I complete them. And I'm trying to channel the spirit of the drawing, almost documenting that printing process. And when I started working with these, I had no idea what my palette should be or anything of that sort. And this developed. At first, was really lost until I really deeply connected with the color palette that Roy Lichtenstein was using in the 1960s. And I came up with, and it was really just what the printing process for those comic books or printing in general looked like in the 60s, which was this kind of heavy dark ink and cyan and magenta. And that really then made the pieces gel. And then the piece on the far right, and here's an example where there's no way that there's, all these Wonder Women, but I wanted to show the idea of women in general. So they're a surrogate. And I figured if any the caption is more about his emotional state, that he's never gonna, despite what he says, he's never gonna get over. And then these two pieces, now these pieces have shown at Glen Echo at the Stone Tower, which by the way is despite the popcorn gallery being great, Jordan, the Stone Tower is awesome. I love that space. These pieces here were wanted to capture the Me Too movement. So the piece on the far, without addressing it in an obvious way or directly. So the piece on the far left is called 0 Hour, and it's basically she's speaking out against and finding strength in numbers, while the Wonder Woman piece is I grew up on watching Wonder Woman, and on the TV in the 80s, not so much growing up, but watching her. And I really love the way that character would just bend guns and break them and stuff. So I thought it would be fun to do this piece that was, against just no gun control. So, I wanted to do a piece on some kind of gun control. So I had Wonder Woman saying enough, and this piece is called No More Gunplay. Which again, this was shown over at Glen Echo. This piece was different. Again, it's expanding what I'm doing, and this was called Sacred K, and it ties in with my Cuban culture with the Bay of Pigs and JFK, and also my being an American. With the passing of JFK and Jackie Kennedy continuing on. And I tend to play with Latin phrases in my artwork, and beneath her, this is speaking to the Sacred Heart, which is also a strong religious aspect in the Cuban community, or at least it was in my childhood. And the Latin phrase is, darkness is temporary, light is permanent. So sharing a little bit about myself. More recently in the Popcorn Gallery, I had an opportunity to exhibit with in a two-person show with a partner of mine. His name is Fierce Sonia. But I put in 2 new pieces in that show, which spoke to the pandemic and the need to come together and the irony of it, and that's depicted in the piece in the far left with the media representing conservative and liberal media, and the enemy outside being a virus that was going on. While the piece on the right, I call that American Dance Party, and that was just generally trying to capture the idea of how there were so many different opinions happening in the country at that time when the pandemic was developing, and whether we should be careful or we should just continue as usual. But these pieces allow me to talk a little bit about the nostalgic quality that I like to have in my work. In the background of American Dance Party, we have the dots or the Wonder Bread logo and the colors from it. The headgear is, I lifted off the coronavirus, but also it's like a 1960s lamp. So I'll introduce these elements, and also just the choice of the geometric patterns that I like to have in the work. And this was the piece that was on the wall for the popcorn exhibit, for the exhibit at the Popcorn Gallery. And this was a collaborative piece. It's a lot looser. It has both our styles coming through on it. I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to see that exhibit. Here's some images from those various exhibits at the Stone Tower. And just a brief listing of solo exhibits that I've had the opportunity to be part of, or to organize, excuse me. And I think we have just enough time where I can show you a little bit of the studio, but I can also briefly show you some images of what I said about constructing my paintings. So on the, again, that's my original studio that I started off working. And here on the far right, lower far right, you can see that I have a large template that I transfer the drawing over. But you'll notice a lot of the blue painter's tape. So I don't transfer it all at once. I do it in pieces. I do details towards the end. You can see me there transferring the detail of the yin and yang symbol that was made out of foam for this piece. And this piece was called Balanced Blend. And it showed at the Stone Tower for my exhibit that I had there in 2015 called Cafe Plus, which showed a variety of just like pop culture iconography that included coffee and coffee culture. I'm gonna stop sharing and hopefully be able to give you a view of the studio. I'll switch over. How, is this okay, Jordan?
Or
we're getting a little close to 11:30, correct?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to switch devices. Or you know what? Let me just try this. Can I? Should I get pinned?
Yeah, Mariana, you'll have to pin the camera that he'll switch to.
All right. So let me see if
I don't see a video feed from that one though.
Yeah, let me see. Can you guys? I'm going to bring my easel over here into view.
I think that works fine. We'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how I mean, we saw the stencils and the transfer, but just process in general for you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have an example, and you know, it's I use stencils sometimes in my work, but this is technically a drawing transfer. I was using projectors initially to transfer my small drawings onto a canvas, get the structure, the composition from something that was proportionately equivalent to the canvas that I was working on. But then when I switched over to these more complicated drawings that had all this geometry, there was all this distortion happening in the image, which I was compensating for in the drawing with those more realistic, pseudo-realistic images. And I couldn't work with that. So I stumbled across while reading something on the Renaissance that for the frescoes or for other drawings, the Renaissance masters would take drawings, scale them up from their books and then transfer them to the walls or transfer them to canvas. And that was one way that they got those larger drawings. So I started thinking, well, how can I transfer my digital drawings? So I started, so I took the drawing and I would print them in sections onto newsprint which I would cut down myself because it's a 13x19 printer. And then I would collage, and I'm going to walk off screen to grab a piece to demonstrate this.
Yes.
Great. I would then collage them together and create a larger. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hopefully, I'm not pinned, so I can't see a fuller screen of what you're seeing, but hopefully I can point to what's happening. Now, there are certain things that, as I said, it is a rough. It looks really like, oh yeah, he's nailed it. That's exactly what's on the canvas. But this is just, for instance, it's just the idea of it all, because what I'd like to do is, now can you guys see that?
Yes.
I want to draw attention to the hand that's here. Can
Yes.
you guys see that here?
Yes.
So over there, it had to be cleaned up.
Oh.
It may not be that obvious. The drapery here is also being cleaned up. So there's a lot of there's a lot of editing and growth that happens through the process of doing this piece. And none of these smaller details that you see here are transferred because I paint the idea of them. Well, I just look over to this drawing and kind of just create a pattern that makes sense. But this is here to just tell me to do that. And what happens is, can you guys see how these will come apart? Can you see that? I don't want to ruin it, but.
Yeah.
So those are your prints in sections.
So these are sections. First I transfer something that's more of a full drawing, but then I cut them off. I cut the pieces out and begin to transfer details as I need them,
And do you use?
I'll also, as you saw, I'm going to put this down, hopefully, and I'll bring it back up. But this is a digital drawing. I then, in sections, print it out and stick it together, and then using carbon transfer paper. At smaller pieces, I use more traditional, like rubbing the back or drawing. You can use a light box and follow along the edge of your drawing, and then transfer it that way. I found it for this scale. I'll do the carbon paper, and I buy it from woodworking sources, and it's 24-inch rolls. It's or even sometimes I've been able to get it 48-inch, and I'll be able to transfer the drawing that way. And there was another aspect, which is, I go back to, it's an artist environment is what creates their practice. I couldn't necessarily transfer a drawing all in one night using the projector. So I had to figure out a way to be able to walk away from transferring the drawing. So by using carbon paper and this pattern, I could attach it with bulldog clips to the painting and just walk away from it when I needed to walk away from it. And it would not move, it would not change. I was able to transfer it at my own pace. And that's a practice that's really been beneficial for me. And the way I build the paintings, whether it's in, interesting thing is I've switched over to oil paint. The process between oil paint and acrylic is similar in the sense that I layer the painting. Almost, I'm not doing necessarily glazes, but to arrive at the opacity that I want and the color that I want, I'll do layers where at some points it is a glazing and it can alter the color. So for instance, with this orange that's here, this is going to most likely change into not this kind of orange, but a different one. It'll be through a glaze process. I know time is limited, and I wonder if you guys might be interested to possibly, if I switch the device, so you could see the pattern a little bit more closely, or were you guys able to see that from a distance?
Oh, I think we can get the idea behind it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is really cool. I want to just say it's from an educational background. You know, I also have an illustration degree, and graphic design was a part of that as well. But it's interesting to see how you've taken something like illustration or design and really made it a fine art in a way, which I don't think I see as often in the art world. I think you had like that kind of that pop art blip that I don't feel it has as much of a duration, but you really kind of revived it and made it unique and very you too. So I want to just say really great work, and we're really happy to have this talk today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jordan. It was really a pleasure to share how I construct my paintings and a little bit about myself and the history of Caribbean.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks so much.
This is fantastic. Can I ask you, when you do oil, are you now painting the colors in oil by hand?
Yes, it is now. I've transitioned over to oil. The piece, the collaborative piece that was at the Popcorn Gallery, that was acrylic. So my preferred medium is oil paint, and now I paint less toxic. I use slow drying oils to clean my brushes and to not necessarily, and I also only reserve solvents because even mineral spirits smells too much for me. But I'll use boiled linseed oil to clean the brush, and then just wash it out with soap and water. But if I don't necessarily want to clean on a particular night, because I know some people dread cleaning their brushes, I just dip them in a slow drying oil and like walnut oil, and then just make sure I clean it off the next day. You know, it lasts for like 3 days. So if the kids kind of get demanding with my time, I'm like, yeah, no problem.
Clean mine every 3 months, maybe.
Oh, excellent. I'm a little too fastidious then.
No. Japan, I cleaned them once in 3 years.
Excellent.
Amazing.
I want to echo Jordan's comments. This was fantastic, and really a way to translate into fine art what started as graphic design. And I love it. I more understand your painting now. That's really, really educational and so cool. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. Any other questions before we round up?
This is really nitty gritty question. How do you do the lettering?
So the lettering is, so I transfer it. So the lettering is in the drawing. Can you see that? So it's actually there. So I transfer it, but I then will actually do the stroke. The lettering isn't transferred through stenciling, you know, and dabbing through a stencil. I actually do my father was a sign painter, so I saw him actually paint signs by hand. So I bring that to the table here where, you know, the upward stroke, I'm not a good calligrapher, so I would never, you know, say that, but I will do the letter form as a, you know, a downward stroke, the shape of the B. Sometimes I like futz around it, you know. But they're hand painted, they're not stenciled on. The piece that large piece that was at the Popcorn Gallery, that was a stencil and was pushed through a stencil, the blah, blah, blah danger that was on there. But for these paintings over here, it's all hand done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, nitty gritty, additional nitty gritty. That's why I have this stabilizing bar here, which will help me, it helps steady my hand when I draw the letters with the paintbrush. So that's a steady bar, so I can just get those little precise strokes in.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
How do we reach you after the fact if we have any questions?
So I can put up briefly, hold on, let me screen share again. So I have a slide. Let's see. You see that?
Yep. Let me take a quick screenshot of it.
Yeah, take a screenshot. That's you can contact me through the studio website or just send an email to the ricgarcia121@gmail.com.
Thank you again, Rick.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too.
Bye, everyone.